our culture and society. So, yes. When we look at do what thou wilt, when we look at true will, this is the idea that has to underlie all this, of course. We look at how to create sort of teamwork between human beings. And Crowley thinks that this is the solution to, not saying that we're going to get rid of people's conflicts and stuff like that, but following this out is going to be the solution, because when you have people working together on a certain project, they don't care that everyone's not doing things the same way. It's about producing the end result of that project. The example Crowley uses is, the pitcher of a baseball team doesn't hate the catcher because they play different positions. They just accept that we're here for different reasons, we're doing different things, and we're all working towards the same goal, winning the game. But in absence of that goal, people start to criticize each other's personalities. They get upset with little foibles. They see the ways in which other people aren't like them, don't want the things that they want as flaws, and everything just deteriorates into a kind of petty squabble. This was ultimately Crowley's problem toward the end of his life with group work and group workings, and he said, when you get a certain number of people together, all they want to do is criticize each other's hats and their morals, and then it just becomes about that instead of what the group is there to do. So this is a big deal, and in a way, having those kind of shared goals is what allows people to work together without degenerating into that. And if there are no higher goals, then that's what you're going to see. And I think that is what we see. I mean, I don't think any of this is really obscure. I think it's all right there, which is odd because it's very easily overlooked. Now, for the book itself, I certainly would recommend using it in a ritual context, and the physical book is a good talisman or whatever. I actually use it as a lamen myself. I'll buckle it over my chest in ritual settings. It's a way of identifying oneself and one's allegiances here. Okay, what am I missing? Oh, right. Okay. There's another major issue, which I don't want to necessarily go into vast detail about because it's complicated, but when Crowley's talking about the proofs of the book, and he's really describing the kind of things that we should all be looking for in our magical rituals. There's a number of mathematical proofs that come from Liber and some interesting mathematical formula. You can look, there's much that's been written about this, but this, to Crowley, is the main thing, is that if you can reduce it to mathematical formula and it still makes sense, then it's going to, that's sort of an objective way of communicating. And that's standard with these kind of higher entities and higher intelligences, because when math is like, what's the word I want? It's an abstract language, but it's easy to interpret into different images and symbols. So we can take these different images and symbols and reduce them to a mathematical component, then that's what we have. That's how Crowley got into his relationship with Frederick Cod, who he came to reveal, or believed to be his magical son for a period of time, although he saw Cod as kind of falling off the path. But Cod was able to do things with the math behind Liber and reveal things about the math behind Liber that no one had seen up until that point, and Crowley certainly hadn't seen up until that point, and to him, this was a huge validation of everything he had been saying about the Book of the Law. Now, there's one other issue that I really should touch on, and this is something that's definitely, that people have problems with, because it's apparently contradictory. Crowley tells us that we're here to promulgate the law of Thelema, to spread it around, to make sure that people know about it, but at the same time it also says, convert not. That's very clear. It's not, we're not seeking to convert people to Thelema necessarily, as much as, to let them know that it's there. And this is kind of the thing, because people like to get into the promulgation thing, and then it turns into a lot of nonsense, a lot of people not focusing on real Thelema and what it's about. But at the same time, it is one of the major duties. So understanding how to reconcile these two ideas is one of the things that I think everyone who is invested in the Book of the Law has to grapple with in some way. I'm not trying to answer the question for anybody, but I am saying that's going to be a source of conflict. And it's a big source of conflict in the Thelema community right now, as most of you know. All right. Now, the other thing that we should bring up is, particularly in the third chapter. The third chapter is where people start to get kind of antsy and upset It says things like, worship me with fire and blood, I will give you of their flesh to eat, not, kill and torture, for example. Mercy let be off, damn them in pity. I could go on endlessly. Well, not endlessly. But yes, this is something that people are going to have to grapple with in some way, and I think that it's interesting. There's points in his writing about the Book of the Law that Crowley says that he keeps trying to interpret things symbolically, and Iwas keeps telling him, no, these aren't symbols. This is, this is something that I literally mean, which makes people uncomfortable, obviously, and you see people do this all the time. I remember I was reading Marcellus Modus commentary recently, and when he deals with the "I give you of their flesh to eat" line, he says, he does, and it's delicious, and it's just like, dude, you just completely dodged the question. And that's, I think, what most people do. They try to look at different ways to have cute little responses to these things, and I don't think that they should be cute little responses. I think that people, especially if they want to take Liber Al really seriously, they should sit down and really look at what they don't like about the book and why. And I don't think that that's going to mean that their reasoning for not liking those things is right, but it's important to identify these things. This comes back to the people who don't want to admit that they have a problem. If you want to try to accept, or you want to advance the idea that you like all of Liber Al, but you don't really, they really are parts that bother you, and there should be. And of course there should be, because any serious commitment to any kind of religion or philosophy, you're never going to agree with everything that you see. But the problem is that we, in a conversion culture, particularly in a religion which is prone to accepting conversions, people have an expectation in this kind of very secular culture that if they don't like something about a religious system or an idea, that system should change to meet their needs and their desires. They don't feel like they should change to meet what that system demands of them. And when they start realizing that they can't grapple with it without actually making changes, they move along to the next thing that's easier to incorporate into whatever they already believe. You see this a lot, or I saw this a lot personally, because when I was in school for religious studies, where people would convert to these Eastern religions, and they would only engage in these Eastern religions through some very hippie kind of texts that would interpret them. They didn't have the scripture in front of them to actually challenge them. They had someone there explaining, oh no, it's going to be okay, you're going to like this, trust me, this is all good, it's all gravy. And we actually see that a lot in Thelema today, with people writing these kind of beginner books that are very they soften Thelema. They do a great deal to soften Thelema, and I don't think Thelema is meant to be soft, and that's very clear from the Book of the Law. The things that are upsetting in there are things that we are meant to take joy and pride in and really throw ourselves into, not to run away from and not to explain away. And certainly, there's a tendency to try to avoid the core texts. Even to me, even the writing of beginner books for Thelema is ridiculous. Crowley wrote beginner books, like Magic and Theory and Practice is a beginner book with this big section on Thelema. His commentaries are meant for people who are just new to the Book of the Law, trying to understand its ideas and stuff like that. And Crowley went to great pains to make these very clear to people. He uses big words sometimes, again, but, get with the program. We all have dictionaries, especially now. It's only going to take you a couple seconds to look a word up if you don't understand it. So there's really no reason for Crowley to require these introductory texts, especially when he devoted so much time and energy, magical energy, personal energy, financial resources, to producing texts that were intended to do exactly that. And particularly with regards to the Book of the Law, you find that these texts will not ever, the books we have around now, they will not ever touch these kind of issues. I remember was one prominent author who was talking about a video that he made, and he said, this is something that, if you wanted to explain Thelema to your nice Protestant grandmother and she'd be okay with it, then you show them this video. And I don't think your nice Protestant grandmother is going to like Thelema if you're explaining it right. I think if you explain it the way she likes it, you explained it wrong. You missed something, for sure. So this is the thing, and I just want to really emphasize, I'm not telling people not to be uncomfortable with these things. I'm telling people to admit when they are uncomfortable with these things and see how they engage them. I personally, when I first read the Book of the Law, I hated it. I actually wrote a commentary on it myself, essentially trying to explain that Crowley was in contact with an evil entity that was messing with them, and it's like, I don't get this. I was kind of somewhere in between Taoism and paganism, kind of in my own thinking at the time. And I was really threatened by it, and I wanted to try to dismiss it as much as possible right away. But it wasn't until later on when I started, because I got into the occult through ceremonial magic myself, so I was experimenting with using